Joining us now to discuss Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' proposed property tax reform is Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Thank you so much for joining us, Brandon. First, what's your reaction to the Florida governor's plan to eliminate property taxes for homeowners?
Well, we love to see lower property taxes, and I think the governor is right in assessing that people are very frustrated out there. We've seen property values increase dramatically in so many parts of this country, especially Florida, where we've seen a huge population surge, and people are really frustrated, and in some cases, they're unable to pay those property tax bills. So I think he's right to identify this as an enormous problem, and I think he's right to try to lower that burden on American families, Floridians who own property. The question is, can we get there math-wise? Can we make sure that they're providing the necessary services, public safety, the infrastructure that we all know that they need while zeroing out property taxes? It's not going to be easy, but hopefully they can figure out a way to get there.
Yeah, say a bit more about that. What's the potential downside of a tax reform like this?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the how the property taxes are allocated, how those revenues are utilized, and many of them are collected and spent by these local jurisdictions, the cities and counties, not by the state itself. So if those local jurisdictions are unable to provide the money that they need for schools, for public safety, for those core public services, then we have a problem. That's why the governor was identifying the fact that they have a budgetary surplus in Tallahassee. And if they can help out those local governments, then they may be able to make the math work and zero out property taxes while continuing to provide a high level of services to the constituents of Florida.
It'll certainly be interesting to follow next week. Could we see similar property tax proposals in other parts of the country?
I think it's possible. A lot of people are watching Florida right now, and a lot of states are trying to replicate Florida because it's been such a success story, along with states like Texas and North Carolina. The policies that they've set forth in these states have attracted so many residents, so many businesses and families that want to be part of that success story. And so, yeah, people are watching Florida closely. And if there's a path here, if DeSantis is able to thread the needle here and zero out property taxes, they already have no income tax, and provide those services and continue to attract residents, there's absolutely going to be other states that attempt to follow suit.
Now, reforms like this, Brandon, take the edge off taxpayers. But what about the price of gas? How can the federal government give us some relief?
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms, and that's a really tricky situation. The best way to lower the gas prices, we all know, is to end the conflict in the Middle East. The quicker we wrap that up, the more readily we're going to see gas prices fall. Beyond that, I would like to see additional permitting reforms. The president has enacted some which have increased the amount of output that we have when it comes to oil production. That's been a huge boon, but there's a lot more that we can do. And I think there's also the need to provide a level of certainty that our oil companies need to find and extract oil. And that means passing statutes, not just doing things administratively, but making sure Congress and the president are working together to create permanent policies that create more supply. We all know from Econ 101, when you create more supply, you lower those prices. That's what the American people need to see right now.
Yeah, and expanding on that, you've mentioned the possibility of increasing imports to lower prices. What would that look like?
Yeah, I think we should increase imports across the board. One of the ways we can alleviate prices is simply to eliminate all the tariffs that we have right now. The president has imposed a lot of tariffs. Those are putting upward pressure on prices. The quicker we get rid of those tariffs, the better off we're going to be price wise. I think one of the issues that we see, one of the issue areas that we see, things like beef. If you've gone to the grocery store lately, you've seen just exorbitant prices for ground beef. It could be $6, $7, $8 a pound or even more. That is really taking a bite out of Americans' wallets right now. There was a proposal that the president started to put into place to bring in more beef imports that would absolutely lower prices. Unfortunately, the beef industry pushed up against that, and right now it's being held in limbo. So hopefully we can get that policy enacted into the law. I think if Trump is able to do so, that will see lower prices for beef. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg, I think, when it comes to lowering prices through more imports.
What do you think about the use of a gas tax holiday in a circumstance like this?
Yeah, and then the gas tax, when you talk about the combined federal and state gas tax, that's about 50 cents per gallon. And certainly we would like to see gas prices come down. The tricky part here is if you eliminate the federal income tax, I'm sorry, the federal gas tax, which is a little over 18 cents per gallon, it's unlikely that all 18 cents of that would flow through to consumers. A portion of it would, but not the entirety of it. And meanwhile, we have a highway trust fund that we need to replenish and restore our bridges and highways in this country. It's already scheduled to go bankrupt in just about a year because it's been so poorly managed by Congress over the years. This would accelerate the demise of the Highway Trust Fund and make it more difficult to fund our highways and bridges and other infrastructure. So I think that's has a little bit of an asterisk. It may provide a little bit of short-term relief, but there would be major cost. And when you're already running a national debt approaching $40 trillion, you need to be very, very mindful of additional costs on the federal treasury.
Brandon, what are you hearing from everyday Americans about the impact of increased gas prices on their lives?
Yeah, it's a sad story because, for some people, it's an annoyance. For other people, it's absolutely catastrophic to see gas prices as high as they are, canceling vacations, really struggling in order to fill up the tank just to get to work and perform their normal functions, get their kids to school, and so forth. So it's an enormous problem right now. It's an economic problem. It's a political problem as we start to get closer and closer to the midterms. So this is a crisis level situation for many Americans. And unfortunately, I think if this conflict continues in the Middle East, we could see additional price increases going forward as we've seen inventory start to draw down and those buffers that we have put in place to shield us from the full impact of shortages like we're experiencing now. As those buffers start to get narrower and narrower, then we could see even more price escalation, which would be, again, really devastating for average Americans.
So, what can folks do to gain some relief of their own accord?
Yeah, it's challenging because you talk about oil, you're not just talking about gasoline prices, you're talking about diesel prices, which get goods around the country. And when those prices go up, it becomes more difficult to move goods around, then prices go up. Oil goes into so many products, so many consumer products, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and so forth. So the price increases are felt throughout the economy. It's not like you can just stop driving and you will avoid this problem in its entirety. You may be able to shield yourself to some extent, but you're still going to feel the cost of higher oil prices in other areas. So there are things that people can and should be doing, cutting back on energy usage, driving less if possible. But that's a tough pill to swallow for many Americans that rely on their automobiles to get them to work, to get their kids to school, and to perform the everyday tasks that they need to perform. So it's a really tough challenge right now.
All right, Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, thank you so much.